Liquid staking, basically when you deposit it into Lido, Lido will mint a liquid staking token. And that, you guys might know it as StEth. That is Lido's liquid staking token. Now, if you stake with another liquid staking protocol, that is going to be different. There are different liquid staking tokens. Lido's is StEth in the case of Ethereum. So you use that, and that liquid staking token, the way that I like to frame it is that it's like a coach check ticket. So you basically have the liquid staking token that represents your stake that you can always go back to the protocol to redeem your stake. That is staked into the protocol. So it's always going to be redeemable one for one. So that's a little bit about liquid staking. Now, the reason why liquid staking really matters is that when Ethereum's proof of stake model was first introduced, it came with a bit of like downside. So for example, the first piece is, in order to participate in staking, you needed a minimum investment of 32 Ethereum, which can be quite high depending on, what kind of user you are in the price of Ethereum at the time. The other piece is that you need to lock up those assets. So a big question is always like, well, why would I want to deposit my 32 Ethereum when I could be participating in DeFi and earning a much higher yield than the base yield on chain? So that was another consideration. And then the other piece is, you need to know how to run a node, which is not necessarily accessible to someone that doesn't have the technical expertise. But that's all good. But that's a big problem when the security model of Ethereum relies on people participating in staking. And so if, for example, it's too complex, it's not and the incentives are not there, then people are not going to be willing to deposit their capital and to secure the network. So it was a big kind of problem, a big, in need of a solution. And then liquid staking came and said, you know what? We're going to make it a lot more accessible for people to stake, to participate in staking, not only to participate in the rewards, but also to align incentives and to participate in securing the network.
Right. Thanks, Valerie. I think that's a very clear explanation about what liquid staking and what Lido is building. So for some of you who just joined in our live stream today, so hello and welcome to another episode of Crypto.com Live AMA. My name is Tommy from Crypto.com. I work at the capital team, which focuses on VC investment, and I will be your host for today's AMA. And today we are joined by Valerie Tetu, who leads go-to-market strategy at Lido Finance. So just a very brief background, Lido is a liquid staking protocol that allows users to stake the proof of stake chain's native token in exchange for a liquid staking derivative token. So in the case of Ethereum 2.0 liquid staking, Lido allows users to stake any amount of ETH in exchange for its liquid staking derivative StEth, which can then be used in DeFi protocols. As of today, Lido has over 5.8 million total amounts of ETH staked, being the largest liquid staking protocol in terms of the amount of staked ETH. So here to answer your questions about Lido is Valerie, and so we will go back to the questions directly. So I think Valerie, you just mentioned about so Lido being originated from Ethereum, but at the beginning, but a lot of L1s also use the proof of stake consensus mechanism. So this is a question from the Twitter users LO80XCU. So how many different chains does Lido run on?
So Lido is currently on Polygon. So you'll know that liquid staking token associated with that is STmatic, Ethereum, which includes also L2s. So there's a different liquid staking token associated with Lido on L2s, which is wrapped staked ETH, and which is the wrap version of staked Ethereum, and Solana. We had Kusama and Polkadot in the past, but given that the DeFi activity was not as active on those networks, basically we decided to sunset it. So it's actually in the process of winding down at the moment.
I see. So when you're explaining about liquid staking protocol at the beginning, right? So I think there are mostly two sides that contributes to it. On the one hand, you have the staker who stake their ether into Lido, and on the other hand, you have node operators that actually run the validated nodes and secure the network. So let's start with the questions about staker. When a staker stake Ether and they get StEth in return, right? So of course they would love to like use it some way, right? So in terms of the DeFi use case, I understand the most common ways of using StEth right now include like being a liquidity provider on Curve, or like you use it as collateral to take out loans on RFA, etc. So going forward, what is the strategy for Lido in terms of DeFi integration and enabling more use cases for StEth for the stakers?
Yeah, so Lido, we really see ourselves as just infrastructure. So we provide liquidity, like infrastructure that aligns basically incentives of users and the security of the network. Now, Lido, as a very kind of neutral protocol and asset, we need to think like from, especially from my side, I'm super biased, but from a go-to-market perspective, is what is position to do and what do the users of token and of care about, and that its composability and its liquidity. The reason for that is that if as a user I am holding a liquid token, there are many liquid staking protocols that offer a similar service, but the reason why I would choose a specific liquid staking token is because I have access to the most DeFi, the largest number of DeFi strategies. And the other piece is liquidity. The reason for that is that I want, if say I want to trade, I want to use my liquid staking token, which is the value of a liquid staking asset. I want to be able to trade it with minimal slippage, so with minimal difference in terms of market pricing, and also be able to access it on a lot of different markets. So it's all about the utility of the asset. So what, for example, the reason why Lido was also very, very successful is because it really optimized for broad distribution and integrations across of DeFi in order to make it the asset that has the most utility and is also the most liquid. So as a user, that's really incentivizing. That strategy is not changing moving forward in the sense that Lido basically that's what it's intended for. It's intended to be that asset that is the liquid active asset that can be used in DeFi. The whole thesis around it is that actually we see a future in which when in the future you hold Ethereum, you think right away, I will use my Ethereum to secure the chain. I will use it to stake and to basically make the chain more secure. And basically we see the liquid staking assets. So if you deposit them through a liquid staking protocol as the assets that then you would take with you and then use in DeFi, use to trade, use to pay for things, to transact. So really as the ones that circulate in the economy. So that's kind of like how we see things. And so for that to happen, for that thesis to happen, the liquid staking asset has to be the most integrated, the one that is most used into DeFi. And the other note that I would add to that is that Lido as a neutral protocol, it can basically, anyone can decide to integrate StEth. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of demand for it. Protocols, if you're a DeFi protocol and you want to integrate StEth directly, then you can do it for free, for sure, on your own terms. And so that's kind of like the way that it would move forward. So expect more integrations moving forward.
Right. So I think, yeah, what you're saying is like definitely like I definitely agree with you, right? So I think one of the concern, right, for achieving this future that like people use the ETH to like stake to secure the network, and then when they think about DeFi, they would think about like STE, like liquid staking in general, right? So I think one concern is that whether the liquid staking derivative can hold up its value, right? Because ETH, we know that what is used for, and we're already used to like the Ethereum ecosystem, but liquid staking is something relatively young, right? So under normal situation, like liquid staking derivatives such as StEth should be packed closely to Ether, like around approximately 1 to 1, right? Not exactly, but like close to that. So the next question is from the Twitter users JIEQINT. So he's asking, how likely is StEth going to depack from ETH, and what contingency plans do you have in place in the event that it actually happens?
All right, so I will answer that question first by just clarifying something. There is a kind of association, let's say, past. I would even say kind of like what happened with Luna, which is supposed to be a stable coin, where people had expectations of my stable coin, is pegged to a dollar value. And I always expect it to be pegged to that dollar value because, it is backed by reserves and all of these things. The little nuance to be made with liquid staking tokens and stable coins is that it is not pegged. Ideally, it would be in an efficient market where things are priced according to, the underlying value. The one thing that will always be sure and certain, and that is because it is coded in the smart contract, is that your StEth will always be redeemable for one Ethereum staked with Lido. Because the protocol, if there's one ETH deposited, there's one ETH that is minted. Now, the price of StEth, that is a different question, because actually the price of StEth is in a secondary market. So people can price it differently. Now, if we assume that, there are people that arbitrage on both sides, that then in an efficient market, it will always be one-to-one. Right now, because withdrawals are not possible on Ethereum, there isn't that arbitrage that can be done on the other side, which leads to sometimes some price inefficiencies. Well, past withdrawals, that is expected to change because the arbitrage can be done on both sides. So people will want to take advantage of the discounts or premiums on both sides and really like adjust them and trade them accordingly. Now, in terms of in the past, though, I can definitely understand that you've seen the price fluctuate, quite a bit, especially when there were all of these liquidations happening, when Celsius went down, when Three Arrows Capital went down, all of these things. The reason for that is that these firms specifically needed liquidity. They needed access to capital. And actually, without a liquid staking protocol, if Lido didn't exist, for instance, and they didn't stake their Ethereum on Lido, they would have never been able to access that excess capital because it would have been locked up on Ethereum on chain. So they were able to exit their positions to trade them on the market. Now, the reality is they had a lot of capital and they needed access to a lot of capital to, mitigate their liquidations and other capital requirements, to meet their capital requirements. And so they exited a very, very large amount of StEth, which kind of like put the price down, and the demand didn't match the excess supply on the market. So the price was a bit lower than what it actually represents. But again, now that arbitrage can be done on both sides, that will hopefully equilibrate. We can't promise anything, but that's kind of like the thesis. And the other piece to note is, regardless, the StEth always represents one ETH to be redeemed through the protocol.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, right? And it also touches on like the upcoming Shanghai upgrade that Ethereum is going through, right? So we will also touch on questions about Shanghai upgrade in later in this AMA. So, but before we move to that, right? So because there are node operators running the validator nodes, right? So there is like a chance for their stake ETH to be slashed, right? In case of like a malicious behavior, for example. And I think for Lido, there is a like an existing insurance pool which has around like 6K StEth sitting there. So may I know is this kind of like slashing protection calculated based on some like risk assessment by the Lido DAO, or like how does it like come up with this insurance pool, and how can it protect the users in case there's like a validator is getting slashed?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. And in terms of the way that it was set, it's based mostly kind of on previous parameters. Now, in the future, though, we are, I think it's something that we're actually thinking a lot about in terms of how can we like embed insurance into the protocol. So we're actually having discussions with other players in the field. We're thinking about ways to kind of integrate it within the protocol so that it's built in for the individual users, just based on, you know, on their stakes. So that will actually evolve quite a bit.
Right. So we're excited to see like how it will develop, and yeah. So we've talked quite a lot about like the sticker side, right? How the StEth can be used, and then how the sticker can be protected. So now let's talk about the other side of the protocol, which are the node operators. So this question is from Twitter user NAH_999_. How can I become a node operator in Lido? What are the requirements to become a node operator, and what are the benefits of becoming a node operator on Lido, maybe compared to like running as like a solo validators or like joining other liquid staking protocols?
Yeah, so right now the process of joining to be a node operator with Lido is permission. There are specific requirements, reasons for why that is. So Lido decided to have a permission validator set for specific reasons that entail, like, first and foremost, capital security. So as you guys know, in proof of stake systems, the node operators need to know what they're doing in order to, you know, process transactions, and hopefully all goes well and they don't get slashed. Now, when users are depositing capital with node operators, you would hope that they know what they're doing so that they don't get your funds slashed. And that's especially important in a case in which you would deposit capital and the capital would be locked and you wouldn't be able to withdraw it from the chain, which is currently the case until the Shanghai upgrade. So that's the first piece. The parameters that they're evaluated on is actually not only performance, but also diversity of their infrastructure and also of their jurisdiction, and just to make sure that there's a good diversity, that it minimizes central point of failures, and that it's a much more kind of like robust set for the security of Ethereum. Now, ideally, that is not the end state of Lido. Lido was intended to decentralize Ethereum, to work for Ethereum, to be just a layer so that more people can participate in staking, but also participate in validating the chain. And that will become increasingly important as more activity comes on chain, and there are more participants, more capital deposited, and all of that. In order to do so, we announced, actually, there's a roadmap to decentralization, which you guys can definitely look into. And we also have something called Lido on Ethereum scorecard, which is actually really, really cool. It's something that I think is super great, and I would encourage any other protocol to kind of do something similar. But it's basically a self-evaluation card of like, how are we doing on all of these things, and like decentralization is definitely something that is like, we are on the path towards improving, and it's a gradual process that is better, that is kind of like move slow and don't break things kind of mindset, but that's how we're seeing it. Now, we just announced something called Lido V2 very recently. You guys might have seen it or maybe not. And what that means basically is that post the Shanghai upgrade, in a line with Lido's goal to further decentralize as a protocol, it's going to enable more types of validators and node operators to participate in the network, like solo stakers and DVT technology, which was not possible in the past. And that will enable permissionlessly people to come and join the node operator set. And the way that it's going to work is basically, in the past, Lido's there's something called the staking router that we're going to introduce. In the past, it was a very monolithic architecture, and that means that it needed basically a lot of changes, and what the new version basically will be modular, so that different types of node operators can come and really set their own parameters, and it will become this marketplace of node operators, which will open up the space for more to participate.
Right, got it. Yeah, I think you already touched on my next question, right, from the Twitter users. So because basically the Twitter users NAH_999_ asked about, can you explain a bit more about like Lido staking router? So these staking routers is only for stickers in Lido, and what are the benefits of Lido staking router? So I think you already touched on it a bit, right? But if there's anything additional you want to add on to that.
Well, the one thing to highlight is really the motivation behind it is the way to diversify and grow the validator set. It's something that we're really excited about, and eventually, basically, it will enable people to also build their own modules. So we will be trying to, open it up for people to build, maybe do some hackathons, things like that. So it will be really, really exciting. Just like stay tuned for the progress. It's something that is still in development. So it's not coming out tomorrow, but the team is working on it.
Right. I think like recently, the major reason why LSD receives like so much attention in the market is because like of course like the upcoming Shanghai upgrade that we just discussed, which is expected in mid-April. So with the Ethereum's Shanghai upgrade, like EIP 4895, which will allow ETH stakers to remove their stake funds as validators, what would be the impact on liquid staking protocols such as Lido? And is Lido expecting like massive withdrawals after the Shanghai upgrade once the withdrawals has been enabled?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about that too. It's always a question where, you never really know what's going to happen. You never know how the market is going to react. Now, I can only speak for myself and what I think, and I'd be super curious to know like what others think about this too, because it's always good to know like what stakers or the audience actually thinks. But the way that I see it is that there was a significant risk, kind of like before Shanghai, of saying if I deposit my capital on Ethereum and it's locked and something goes wrong, like I can't withdraw the capital. So that becomes quite scary as an investor. If I'm a large investor and I have a lot to risk, I might not want to risk that for the rewards that I would get back might not like be worth the risk. So the way that I see it is actually when withdrawals will be possible, it will de-risk a lot of the staking activity and potentially incentivize more to participate. In terms of from Lido, well, that also means that stake can be withdrawn from liquid staking protocols. So it opens it up to, competition and anything like that. Now, if I put my like staker brain and like outside of Lido, if I want to participate in staking, I would still want a very valuable liquid staking asset. So I'd be looking for, one that is the most composable and liquid. And for us, of course, that remains Lido. That's what we're working on. That's what the value proposition of StEth really is. So we believe that there's like a lot of value for that of StEth. But then again, like Lido is just a neutral protocol. I don't operate it. Lido doesn't operate the nodes. Like it's just smart contracts at the end of the day. It serves a good purpose, and we believe that it's well aligned with Ethereum as well. But in terms of the price of Ethereum, of withdrawals, we can't really predict. But hopefully it de-risks and it goes on the positive side.
Yeah, I think we can only wait and see what actually happens. I don't think anyone can actually like accurately predict what will happen because there's so much that's gonna happen, right? So one thing about it is about like the staking ratio, right? So now I think Ethereum is around like mid-teens, around 14%. But in an ideal scenario, just like what you mentioned earlier, right? This the staking ratio, right? When people think about Ether, it should be used to like secure the network and maybe like pay for gas fee. So the staking ratio of ETH should be like relatively high, maybe like 60, 70% or even higher. I don't know. So while all the DeFi protocols, they will actually be using the liquid staking derivatives instead of like Ether itself, right? So, but do you see like this scenario actually happening, this ideal scenario? And if so, how long do you expect it would take to actually achieve this?
So question is yes, 100%. I like, I'm biased, obviously. The reason though why I really believe it, and it's even before I joined Lido, is that it, as a user, like, and as the protocol, it just makes more sense to participate in liquid staking. It's like saying, okay, like have your cake and eat it too. You can participate in staking. You can earn passive rewards while participating in DeFi and like using that asset. It's a fundamentally different paradigm. When you think about liquid staking tokens, it's like you have an asset that is denominated in a growth asset. So as an investor, like Ethereum itself can be framed a little bit as a growth asset if you believe that it's proportional or somewhat correlated to activity on chain that is growing in the right direction and to the apps that are becoming usable and all of that. And that asset basically, okay, you can stake it, you can lock it away and earn yield, which is not yield, but the rewards basically that come from the cash flows of the node operation. But if it's locked away, you're missing a big opportunity to be able to participate and put it to work somewhere else or even use it yourself. So as a user, like why not, deposit it, stake it, earn the rewards, but also benefit from the liquidity of it, of the access to it, and being able to use it elsewhere. I don't know, it's just a personal thing. I find that value proposition really, really attractive. But I think that you kind of mentioned the question about the time that it will take. And I think it's an education problem at the moment. So it's really difficult to understand what staking even is, why it even matters, and to understand why it matters, you need to understand how proof of stake works, why it is a security model and not just some kind of financial engineering scheme. You need to understand consensus mechanism, and then the piece that you need to understand what is liquid staking. Is this new paradigm? What enables you to basically have this representation of stake and to basically be able to use a representation of your capital elsewhere? That exists on a secondary market is really different. It's something that has not crossed the chasm yet. So right now, our step is holding the asset, understanding what it past people can be board the decentralized finance ecosystem. Other opportunities to participate where I put my work. Then you start kind of like opening yourself up to, okay, I can stake it, but I can also liquid stake and then also participate in DeFi. And I'm also contributing to securing and decentralizing the chain, which is fundamentally why all of these things, like, this infrastructure exists, so that we can both enable that DeFi activity that is lively, that we're securing in the first place, and then keeping it secure.
Right. Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to that day where we can see like 80, 90% of the Ether is actually staked. So that which will make like Ethereum much more secure and hopefully also much more decentralized as well. So the next two questions from the Twitter committee focusing on like the security of like the smart contract and also the general regulatory framework. So the first question is a combined question from two users, NAFIDURMUS and also FADANG_19. So are you planning to get like further security audits, and can you assure us what steps have been taken for the safety of the platform? And as an investor, for sure, we can never know, right? We can never be sure, right? As the apps are getting constantly exploited. So, any information that you can provide on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, congrats to both of you for asking this question, because as a user, it's so important. And it's so important to do your due diligence in DeFi in general. And what's funny is between you and I, like, we talk all the time about securing the base layer and about securing Ethereum. And when in reality, the points of failure is often at the top layer, when we're actually trusting just a few engineers to code a smart contract that we have no idea who they are. And then we just trust these smart contracts that we don't understand and that we sign very blindly. And we talk about these systems as if they're trustless, which is not the case. And it is not at the moment. That might change, but it's very important at the moment to do due diligence. In terms of Lido, it's true, like we need to stay on top of these things. In terms of audits, we are blessed with great audit partners, and we have a very robust approach where anything that touches Lido is audited by not one but multiple firms. And that is the case actually also for V2 and past Shanghai and withdrawals. The auditing is actually going to take a little bit longer than most, which explains why actually withdrawals are not going to be possible directly at the Shanghai upgrade date. It might be a little bit later. It might be on the same date. We actually don't know yet, but it's not something that we would ever compromise on. As a DAO, the DAO's first responsibility is keeping capital secure, keeping Ethereum secure, but also users' capital very secure. So that's one thing. In terms of other ways that from my perspective, I think makes it quite secure is just the fact that Lido is DeFi. And it's all on chain, it's all verifiable, it's all transparent. So everybody sees what is happening in Lido. And as a user, you also have full access to that. And the other piece is it's not a staking service. We're not a platform. We're not holding any of your funds. We're not even operating the nodes. Lido's only smart contracts. What that means is that you are in full control of your funds, and there is no, it's very counterparty risk minimized in that sense. So that's also something that I think matters a lot, actually, in terms of the financial services that we build in the future. Is, not only can we disintermediate a lot of systems, but also it just reduces risk a little bit. So that's another piece.
Right. And the next question is from another Twitter user, JIEQINT. So with the regulatory headwinds most companies in the crypto space are now embracing for, so what plans do you have to reduce the risk of getting through that while staying true to the spirit and the open nature of crypto?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Lido is just code. Lido is not even an organization. Lido is just is. And I have no other way to describe it better than this, actually, because for example, in my case, I am a contributor to the DAO. The DAO exists. It's a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of people participating in the ecosystem, and arguably if you participate in governance, or if you're even just an observer, anything like that, you can touch the DAO in a different ways. So it's not an entity, it's not an organization. And the Lido software is basically smart contract code that is maintained by contributors of the DAO. And it exists outside of any geography or jurisdiction because it's on chain. It's on a blockchain that is distributed across computers around the world, owned by different individuals that are not controlled by Lido, can't be controlled by Lido. And it's the same in the case of the node operators, like the as well. So of Ethereum, basically. So in terms of Lido, the protocol, it's really just code. So it's a very interesting question as to say, what does it mean? I think if there is any like interface that interacts with Lido, that integrates Lido as a backend technology, their practices, they might be judged differently. But the code itself, it's like if you were asking, like, for example, okay, like what, I don't know, this backend technology or database or program, how can they be attacked? It's very tough to say because it's just a program. So we don't really know what that means yet, if that will ever evolve. But at this time, Lido just really exists as code.
Yeah, I guess the best example would be Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin is just Bitcoin. It's just here. Anyone can use it. It's always open, no matter what. Right. So next question, we will touch on the competitive landscape on the LSD side. So I think recently we've been seeing, not just recently, I think in the past like years, right, or so, right, we are seeing more players coming into the Ethereum 2.0 liquid staking play. And how do you see the future of liquid staking protocols? And there have been some discussion on like the potential like self cap or self limiting for some of the LSD. And do you think it's gonna be like a winner takes all market where we only have like one or like two major LSD, and then the rest will like just fade out in the backdrop?
Well, I can only speak for myself, what I think. The first thing that I think is, as a DeFi user, I love when there are different options for different things. And I think in open free markets, it's so much better when there's different players, because obviously it keeps all of the players on their toes to, like, provide the best services and infrastructure, and make sure that, like, everyone is top of their game. So from a free market perspective, I think it's really welcome that there are different players. And also what I think is really cool is that there's a lot of different models. Like, Lido is one type of liquid staking, but there are other types like Rocket Pool that might be a little bit more complex from a user perspective, but those that really, want to run their own Rocket Pool nodes or something like that can participate. And there are other models that are different, where it's a little bit more centralized, and other pieces like that. And Lido again is more of an open permissionless infrastructure piece. It's very tough to say. Like, in a way, it's as if I don't see it as like a player, but more as just kind of this infrastructure that exists for liquid staking on Ethereum and on other chains. It provides, it's done in a specific way. It will evolve. Like, I think the important thing to remember is, if these protocols become very large, the self-limiting question can be important or can't be important. The nuance there is to say, is the liquid staking protocol working on decentralization to the extent that eventually it could, be very much, aligned with Ethereum's decentralization, hypothetically? That is not the case currently. But if that is the case, where node operators are very diversified or very distributed at the protocol layer of the liquid staking protocol, then self-limiting should not matter, because the protocol itself will be so decentralized and remain open and permissionless and, outside of anyone's control, that it, as long as it provides that, it says it does, and that of liquid staking, that is really important for Ethereum in this case. Well, that should be okay. In terms of from a user perspective, again, there's a trade-off between having a lot of players and less players, and that is fragmented liquidity. As a user, as a holder of a liquid staking token, I want the liquid staking token to be the most liquid and also the most integrated and composable and all of these things. If the market is really, really divided, and that all of the liquid staking tokens don't have as much liquidity, then it becomes a lot less interesting to hold these liquid staking tokens because you can't perform the same actions that you would want. And that might not be as good on the short term with less capital into the system for liquid staking protocols, rather than more concentrated liquidity. But that applies more broadly, I think, to any other protocol as well, like even lending, borrowing, trading, AMMs, like these things, they're primitives. And if I go on an AMM, I would rather it be one AMM where I have all the trading pairs and all of the liquidity and minimal slippage than I have to go to like 5 different ones for different pairs, and I don't have the liquidity on one. I always have to check and go across without aggregators. Obviously, that's hypothetical. But yeah, that's kind of like what I think about a little bit from a user perspective. And it's to be seen also what DeFi even evolves into. Like I think a lot about, okay, we are building these open, public, permissionless systems. We need obviously to have different primitives that exist. But do we need 5 of the same primitive? Do we need 5 lending and borrowing platforms if they're exactly the same service and the same? It's a different front end experience. It's again, it's that free market thesis where it becomes important for innovation and all of that. But at the same time, there are trade-offs in terms of fragmentation.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you drew the similarities with like lending, borrowing protocols, or like any other DeFi protocols about the liquid segregation. Because I think we're seeing similar things, right? Because now we have like DEX aggregators, right? Those type of like aggregation that allows like users to just go to one platform and to access liquidity for like multiple. So I think we have been seeing some kind of like LSD aggregators are coming out as well. So it's really interesting that to see this kind of like similarities,
True.
the path that we went through with DEX's money market, etc. And now we move to like LSD. So
yeah. And the
so,
last thing is also like, I just want to add one thing is that going back to I think one of the previous audience members had a question about risk and security. Not all liquid staking protocols are secured in the same way. And that is really kind of like something to think about. They're not decentralized in the same way, which is really important for the future of Ethereum, essentially, because it very much affects it as much as we'd like it or not. They don't have the same fees. That's another question that you might want to ask as a user. But the other piece is risk. And I've just from a personal experience, and I'm not a security expert by no means, but it's important to take a look at security.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we've discussed like quite thoroughly about like STE, right? But we all know that, right, Lido has like a governance token, LDO, right, which actually is like the governance token for the DAO. So can you explain to our audience, right, the utility of the LDO token and what you can do with it and how does it actually govern the whole protocol?
Yeah, so LDO is our governance token. Very simply, it enables you to have a power and a say in the evolution of the protocol. So and we have a forum actually where all of these decisions that the community can participate in where you can see it, you can participate with your LDO kind of governance tokens. Now, arguably, LDO token holders have a say into the protocol, but we've been discussing, and actually this is open on the forum at the moment, is we would love our governance to be more representative of stakers and users into Lido. And this is something that is really, really exciting, that I'm really excited about, and I think really matters and could be a potential like new model for tons of DeFi protocols to adopt, is we are introducing dual governance, which means that StEth holders, so like if you deposit stake in Lido, you will also have a veto and a say into the protocol. So that will become really, really important moving forward. It's still being designed. It takes a lot of time, a lot of research. If Vic, you're listening, this one's for you. But yeah, and really encourage like all of you guys to just like take a look. And if it's something that you're interested in, that you want to participate in, we need participation. Like we need people to actually have a say. This is how these protocols like will be maintained, will remain secure also, is by the governance to be as decentralized as the protocol itself.
Right. Thank you so much, Valerie. And that actually wraps up all the time we have for the AMA questions. So thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to the crypto.com and Lido community for sending in all the questions. But before we say goodbye, is there any final message you have for those watching, or where can we find more info about like the new proposals that you just mentioned about?
Yes, so you can go to lido.fi and you'll find kind of like all the different resources there, and the governance forum as well. Definitely encourage you guys to participate. Definitely encourage you guys to experiment and just be curious, guys. Like we're so early into this in so many ways, and you've probably attended talks with Tommy about a lot of different topics. This is a really great time to start learning about it, to educate others, and to ask questions. And I wouldn't hesitate to reach out, whether that is to me, to anyone else. If you have ideas, if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have anything like that, if you want to participate, contribute, like it's an open space. We're working in open permissionless systems, and it's kind of the same, with like ideas and contribution and all of these things. So yeah, definitely just explore, stay curious, and be bold, connect for sure.
Right. And to connect with Valerie, you can find Valerie on Twitter at Valerie Tetu. It's also showing on the screen. And you can also follow Lido at LIDO Lido. And please make sure to follow crypto.com to keep up with all the latest news, upcoming events, contests, and more. And follow us on Twitter at crypto.com, and make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss out any future AMAs. Thank you so much, Valerie. And this is the end for the AMA. And see you next time.